You're listening to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions.
Hello and welcome to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast, a series where we sit down with some of today's most high-profile leaders to explore what it really takes to lead effectively in a fast, complex world. I'm Bridgette, Senior Editor at Criticaleye, and in each episode we get into the thinking, decisions and experiences that shape great leadership. In this episode, we're talking about one of the most ambitious things a leadership team can take on, international expansion. As businesses look beyond their home markets for growth, leadership teams face complex decisions around where to expand, how to enter new markets, and how to align stakeholders around an ambitious growth strategy. In this episode, we'll explore what it takes to grow successfully through international expansion. My guest today is Nick Burns, CEO of Reward Gateway Edenred, an employee engagement platform that under Nick's leadership went through a £1 billion merger with Edenred and has grown into a genuinely international global business. Nick has lived this journey firsthand, and he's here to share what he's learned along the way. Nick, welcome. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
So tell us about Reward Gateway Edenred. What was it when you became CEO and kind of its growth story?
Okay, so I joined the Reward Gateway business in back end of 2022. It was operating under private equity ownership at the time. There were 2 private equity funds who had invested about 18 months earlier. Quite quickly after joining, we went into discussions with a French-listed global organisation called Edenred. And Edenred were very interested in Reward Gateway as a strategic acquisition. And quite quickly, we moved from conversations into full-blown M&A activity with them. And on the 16th of May 2023, we completed the unicorn sale to the Edenred Group.
Yeah. So, like I said, you led the company through this merger with Edenred. Can you tell us a bit more about putting that deal together?
Yeah, I mean, it was it came a little bit out of the blue. We were only 18 months into the ownership of the private equity funds. One of the key strategic rationales from Edenred to acquire Reward Gateway was to take the Reward Gateway platform, which is an HR tech employee engagement platform, and expand it beyond the countries that Reward Gateway were already operating in into all of their main benefits, employee benefits geographies around the world. Reward Gateway were already operating out of the UK, out of the US, and out of Australia. And Edenred also had operations in the UK and in the US. So again, part of the rationale, the strategic rationale of the deal was to merge the UK entities of Reward Gateway and Edenred in the UK and merge the entities of Reward Gateway and Edenred in the US. So you had 2 pieces going on here. You had, or 3 maybe, you had the continued growth of Reward Gateway. You had the merger of the organisations in the UK and in the US. And finally, you had this desire to take the platform onto a global stage beyond those perhaps the best way to describe them were Anglo-Saxon countries, take it beyond the Anglo-Saxon countries into other geographies and cultures around the world.
Yeah, that leads us perfectly onto kind of point of our podcast today. So now that we have a bit more solid idea of the Reward Gateway Edenred journey, let's talk a bit more about your international expansion. What geographies have you gone for? What's kind of the thesis driving that, and what, why did you choose the jurisdictions that you have?
It's a great question, because as you can imagine, during the negotiations around the acquisition of Reward Gateway, if I'm wearing an Edenred hat, I'm thinking, right, how many countries can we get into and how quickly? Obviously, the merger activity in the UK and in the US, whilst never easy when you merge businesses, they were relatively obvious, right? Edenred are super strong in what they offer in the benefits market in Brazil. They're super strong in Italy, in France, and in Belgium. And then you think of the other countries where they're equally sort of number one market leaders, be that Germany, Portugal, Romania, and what was interesting through all of this is the initial view was from Edenred, we want to take the platform and put it into all those countries, obviously. The thing is, it's not quite as straightforward as that, because the world of employee engagement, the adoption of an employee engagement platform by an employer for their employees is quite mature in the UK. It's mature in the US and it's mature in Australia. It is less mature in other European countries. So whilst there inevitably was, let's go into those countries because we're already big in the benefits world, it doesn't necessarily mean that clients will just immediately adopt an employee engagement platform, which is far broader than benefits, just because we tell them that's what they should do. Fortunately, one of the European locations that had already started to mature in engagement is Belgium. So that's where we started, Belgium. And we thought it was going to be a fairly straightforward transition into Belgium. And the truth is, we were just naive in believing that we could just pick up our Anglo-Saxon platform and plop it into Belgium, and without any real deep understanding, in particular of the culture in Belgium. And bear in mind, in Belgium, there's a number of languages spoken in Belgium as a country alone. So it's almost like you have multiple cultures in Belgium. Yeah. And for the Brits to go wandering over to Belgium and believe that we could just drop a platform in there and they'll all be high-fiving us and how wonderful we all are, was all just a genuinely bit naive. Nevertheless, they had partnered with another organisation to provide a similar platform to Reward Gateway, not as good, not as flexible as the Reward Gateway platform, but they did have a partner, and it became very clear very quickly that actually this was more than just putting a platform into a geography. This was about putting a platform in and migrating thousands of clients off of an old platform with millions of employees on that old platform onto this new shiny Reward Gateway platform. And we weren't really prepared for this, I have to say. But our team did the most amazing job, actually. Incredible. They worked really hard with their Belgian counterparts, and we expected it to take 6 months. It took 18 months.
Wow.
But 18 months later, the old platform was gone. the new platform is being used by all these employers in Belgium, and more importantly, perhaps the employees in Belgium. And the usage on the platform is up about 40, maybe even 50%, because it's a better platform than what they had before. But it was much harder than we expected, and our learnings were significant whilst this was going on. And I'm pleased it was hard, and although our teams have got the scars on their backs as a result of trying to do it, I'm pleased it was hard because it helped them understand perhaps what would be needed when going into other countries.
Yeah. What about emerging markets? Because you and I were just discussing India outside, that you've just expanded there. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, maybe before I go to India, just to say that we having learned from Belgium, we went to France, and we now have the full platform in France. We then went to Italy, and we have the full platform in Italy. What we have done is effectively, and this is very relevant to your India question, again, a bit naively, we expected to drop the platform into, say, France and Italy, and they would just pick it up, go and talk to their employers, their clients over in those countries, and the employers would say, yeah, we must dive in and put this platform in for all our people. But again, what we realised was that we needed to create a much greater infrastructure in each country, and effectively create mini reward gateways in these countries. So I don't just mean the technology, I mean the people that go alongside the technology. Because whilst it's a super good technology platform, it needs people, right? It needs people to look after clients, but it's a very different relationship with the client than it would be as a single benefits platform, because it's much broader. It kind of leads to the India question. Edenred were already in India and have a business there that's again, it's a benefits rewards platform in India, but quite narrow in what it does. It's very hard to have run a good commercial operation in the narrow benefit sphere, very competitive market in India. And it's quite hard to build a commercial argument for running that type of a business. So what I did is I went to India to understand a bit more about the Edenred business that was already there. And what became clear is actually, as an emerging market, the world of employee engagement is enormous. There are more employees. Bear in mind, our platform is designed for employers, but really it's there for their employees. There are more employees in India than the US and Europe combined, and Australia actually. And on the basis that our business model is predicated off the employee base, it's a very natural market to try and break into. Employee engagement is starting to become a term in India, more so interestingly than it is in France and Italy. And we have a leader in India she's fantastic and she gets it. So I went over there, did a bit of reconnaissance, and she put together 20 or 30 employers in a room for me just to talk to and understand what engagement of their employees really means. And it became increasingly clear that our platform can solve a lot of the issues that they face. We have to recognise that culturally, again, breaking into that country is going to be different to how we operate perhaps in the UK, Australia and the US. It will be different to how we operate in Belgium, France and Italy. But it's absolutely worth the investment that Edenred will make to find a way to get into that market, take a long-term view in that market, and in so doing become a really dominant force in the Indian market, led by the woman who heads up that business in India, and I think she'll be an amazing leader for that. So we are in the process of building the platform out ready in this year, 2026. Then we'll start the usual marketing and PR and so on. I'm a great believer in never build something and just believe that people will come to you. So we've got to get the fit right with the employers. We've got to get our commercial arrangements right, which will again be different. But once we've got those going, then I think that the opportunity is absolutely there for the taking, and it will make a massive difference to the millions, and it really is millions, tens of millions of employees in India.
Yeah. One of the things you've touched on in the kind of places that you've expanded is how culturally that can be really challenging. And before you go into an international expansion, how do you go about assessing maybe the cultural operational risk?
Yeah.
And maybe that's, like you said, maybe took you a bit by surprise. What did you learn there?
Yeah, and when you get things wrong, you should learn by that, shouldn't you? And interestingly, pre-Edenred days, pre my time actually, when Reward Gateway went into the US, Reward Gateway didn't really consider the cultural difference between the Americans and the Brits. And we then, now we have a successful business in the US, but it took a long time because we believed that the US behaviours, buying behaviours and employee behaviours would be the same as the Brits. Well, they're not. And we sort of made the same mistake, didn't learn from that mistake when we went into Belgium. But we did sort of sort ourselves out, to be honest, and when we went into France and into Italy. And the cultural questions that we were asking were of the leaders of those businesses, Edenred leaders. So we spent a lot of time really deeply understanding the buying behaviours, the employee behaviours, but also the behaviours. You've got the legislation that exists in these different countries as well that we have to be very aware of. But also to figure out the best way that we could work with these countries within Edenred. Forget the clients and their people. So take the French, for example. They're super direct. Right? They are very clear in what they want, but the way in which they describe what they want and how they want it can make Brits a bit bristly. Then you've got the Italians, who are sometimes not quite as clear as the French, but they're so lovable that they're great to work with, but then half the time nothing can get done in time, right? Because we're all running around eating pasta and sipping on limoncellos. What I did was I spent quite a bit of time with the leaders of those countries and their teams to get them to understand how the Brits operate. Many of the Brits who are obviously deploying the technology into those countries, but equally for the Brits to understand how they operate, right? Once you get that cultural alignment going, it helps our people who are putting the platform together for the Brits to put the platforms together for these countries to have a much better understanding of how the clients and their employees are likely to react.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to get your thoughts on is for businesses that are maybe backed by private equity. What role do those investors typically play when it comes to shaping or accelerating international expansion?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the private equity world right now, and inevitably they invest in assets that may be a UK asset or maybe a US asset or whatever, right? Whichever is the sort of the mothership country. And of course, they PE are unlikely to want to invest into a geography unless they see that there is potential growth within that geography. Otherwise, no point in going in there, right? Equally, I think that PE have increasingly been prepared to spread their wings. Obviously, if you're an international global PE house, it's easier to do. But to spread their wings into other geographies. And one thing I think that a lot of the PE houses are starting to realise is that growing organically into other countries is hard. It takes time, and often that time that it takes to be able to demonstrate growth in those countries may not be within the time scale of the fund. So it's probably easier for them to deploy their funds more rapidly through a buy and build strategy, but to buy in another geography and then build out from there, so you've at least got a base. That, I think, is going to increasingly be the way in which PE funds will want to deploy their capital. Now, obviously, you have to find the right target in those geographies, and you need the willing seller and the willing buyer. But if you can do that, and you have if you like, the mothership, wherever that may be, in the UK, for example, to really understand this cultural difference point. It's the most critical piece of the jigsaw for me. You get that cultural difference wrong, if you rock up with some British arrogance, it will not work.
Yeah.
And so that understanding both sides with the support of the PE funds is more likely to be a more successful growth strategy than just drop 2 or 3 people into a country and have them knock on doors and try and build a business from there. I think it just takes too long in the time frame of the funds.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned organic growth there, because there's something else I wanted your opinion on. When comparing M&A and organic growth as a kind of tool for international expansion, what is the benefits and drawbacks of both?
Organic growth, if people are really honest, organic growth is not an easy thing to do. Whether you're in a listed environment, whether you're in a PE-backed environment, whatever, founder-led environment, organic growth is just hard, and everyone wants their 20% year-over-year growth organically, and there's a big market to go into, and all of that usual stuff, right? But truth is, organic growth is not easy, but if you are not capable or able to grow organically, I seriously question the viability of the business. So I really believe that you have to be able to demonstrate that you can grow organically, that the leadership team is able to demonstrate to the shareholders it is capable of growing organically. Once it's demonstrated that, and it doesn't necessarily need to be at the sort of 20% per annum, right? But it needs to be able to prove it can grow. Then it gets the right to be able to enter into M&A activity. You've got to earn the right to be able to ask your investors to deploy additional capital to grow. Now, that may be M&A activity in your own country, or, to your question, internationally. But demonstrate the right in your main country that you're in, that you can grow, and you've got the platform from which to grow, and the people and the attitude and the desire and the ambition to grow organically. Earn the right, and then unleash the capital for M&A activity. One last point I would make there is, in so doing, whether you're going to do M&A activity in country or in other countries, as ever, leadership is a key piece of this jigsaw, because leadership that has been through M&A activity, which is a very, I don't care how good the business case is, it's a hugely emotional move, because you're dealing with people. And so the understanding of the emotions that run through the veins of people whilst they are going through merger and acquisition activity is a really critical piece to ensure it succeeds, whether you're doing it in country or expanding geographically.
I want to touch on you a little bit in that, because I know that when you do M&A, it takes such a lot of time, energy, concentration, also international expansion as well, and you have to still run your business to be really successful. How do you do that as a...
Well, the answer is not easy, right? Which it was. It isn't. You've just got to pick your battles, right? And you've got to trust the people around you. And if you can't trust the people around you, you've probably got the wrong people around you. Because you're right, what you say, it is hugely time consuming. It's very draining emotionally as well. Like I say, you can have the best business case and endless Excel spreadsheets and slide decks pouring out of your ears. But if you don't get the emotional piece behind an acquisition and the impact it has on people, it's unlikely to succeed. But because that takes a lot of time, a lot of thought, and a lot of emotion, your BAU, if you like, your existing business can't fall over during that process. That means you've got to have super good people around you who can continue to run the business for you, so you're not worrying about that as well as worrying about whether or not an acquisition is not only the right thing to do, but if you believe it is, then you complete the acquisition. You've then got to go through integration and all of that stuff without having to worry about your core existing business continuing to grow. So you need great people around you who you can trust and let them do it. And maybe they won't do it exactly the way you do it, but you've got to kind of live with that, right? You can't do everything.
Yeah. And where else do you go to for support, or how important is having a kind of external network in that?
Yeah, very important, particularly if you are expanding internationally. I think more so than if you're just carrying out M&A in your own geography, right? Particularly if you're reasonably experienced at doing so. I'll give you an example. Whilst I've done a lot of M&A activity in different geos, I'd never done any M&A activity, or indeed it wasn't M&A, but it was growth activity in India. And of course, I'm in my conversations with our colleagues in India, I'm asking them a whole series of questions, but I'm also very mindful of the fact that they may well try to be giving me the answers that they think I want to hear. India, for example, is quite hierarchical in the way it operates, and so you always sort of leave meetings and think, have they just told me everything that they think I want to hear? So they can stick me back on a plane and send me back to the UK, and everything's fine. And so I call upon, and did before India actually, called upon friends, contacts, colleagues who understood the Indian culture. Either they're Indian themselves, or they had opened up or operated from that geo, to give me some advice and a steer and things to look out for, and the best way to be successful. You've got to call on the people you know and the connections that you've made, and listen to them, and then make your own decision, right, and draw your own conclusions from that. But don't go crashing in believing you know the answer to all these questions, because the truth is you don't. And that's why I think, in answer to your question, having a good network of people, again, that you trust their view and their opinion is super important.
Yeah. Well, I guess finally, to wrap us up, what would be your one piece of advice to any leadership teams who are about to embark on their first major international expansion?
I can never give you one piece of advice, can I? Never. It's always like loads of things. But
top 5? Top 3?
Look, it's a big old world out there. So be ambitious, for sure. It's very easy to become quite insular and concentrate and focus on your core geographies. But it's a big world out there, and that ambition brings to look elsewhere, to listen to people, to call on the network that you mentioned earlier, but to be really excited about the opportunity that it brings. It's such a privilege, if you're able to work for an organisation and you get an opportunity to venture into, human beings are quite pioneering in many ways in our nature. And if you have that opportunity to be pioneering is such a privilege. And so I suppose I'd sum it up by, if you do have that opportunity in your career, as I have been fortunate enough to have, then you grasp it with both hands and a big old smile on your face.
Thank you, Nick. This has been such an incredible conversation, and especially for being so open and candid about the realities of international expansion, not just the strategy, but really the leadership that comes with it. For our listeners, I hope this has given you plenty to think about, whether you're actively exploring new markets or just beginning to ask the question of what growth beyond your home market might look like for your business. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe so you never miss a conversation. You can find us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find more content just like this and other leadership perspectives by following us on our Criticaleye LinkedIn. That's all for this episode of Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do with senior leaders, visit us at criticaleye.com. Until next time.